up like it did and then collapsed.
To be a devil's advocate, I've seen recently where there's these reports, cash for clunkers, it's positive, there's more cars being sold, and actually I've seen government programs where they're basically continuing to try and do the same thing. There's several million, I think it was $30 million recently, to try and bolster housing by basically paying people's down payments and other such things. Why not just try and spend our way out of this? Why not just say, you know what, we'll just take money and move it around, and at the end of the day, who cares about inflation if we're not starving, if we have cars and stuff?
Well, it's really the spending and the debt that got us into this in the first place. So to say that we should have more spending and more debt is absolutely ridiculous. That was the problem in the first place. Now you're just making it worse. The recession, although it's very hard on people, it's actually the cleansing of the bad investment that occurred before. It's trying to get out the bad stuff, but they're not letting that occur.
What happens if there isn't a cleansing? Because I know right now we have car companies that basically wouldn't exist, or they'd be different car companies if they weren't basically held up like a zombie company. They're dead, but they walk around and move like they're alive. We have banks that are similar. What happens when the natural cycle doesn't happen?
Well, what will happen is we'll get more of what we just had, except it'll actually be worse, because they keep propping up these bad things. And if you left it to the free market, these resources would be used in another place. They wouldn't be going to failing car companies or failing businesses that are being bailed out. And they wouldn't be going to new cars. I mean, like you said, the cash for clunkers, I mean, they're really just destroying wealth. They're taking these old cars and destroying them. These cars that are, some of them are perfectly fine. And it actually, once again, it hurts the poor people, because the poor people are the ones that buy used cars, so it drives up the price. And then, of course, it encourages people to take on more debt by buying new cars.
Now let's go into drive up the price, because I bet a lot of people don't understand that. I mean, when you think about it, there's cars out there that are basically, they're worth $1,000, maybe they're worth $500. A lot of these would be the ones that are considered clunkers. You have junkyards that buy them. You have used car dealerships that strictly deal in very old cars for that market. What happens to them when something that's really worth $1,000 is now deemed worth $4,500?
Well, it does change their behavior, just like they want it, and they'll go out and buy a new car. But once again, where is that $4,500 coming from? When you all of a sudden get a payment for a car that's worth $1,000, where did that money come from? It had to come from somewhere.
It comes from you and me.
It comes from you and me, whether they do it through taxation or through the printing press like we talked about. In some ways, you're paying for it. So again, it's just another redistribution of wealth. And they can say that it stimulates demand, but an economy, this is probably one of the biggest misconceptions. An economy doesn't run based on consumption. Consumption, you can only consume what you first produce. You can't, we demand all kinds of products in our lives, but we have limited resources on this earth. So the only things you can consume are those that are produced first. So saving money is actually a good thing. There's nothing wrong with consumption, but it shouldn't be consumption that of things you don't have. I mean, if you just consume all the time and you don't produce, then you're going to run out of things to consume. I mean, again, they try and encourage spending, but it's not really spending that ultimately drives the economy. You have to have capital investment. You have to actually save money first.
Our national strategy is one of a consumer economy, and it does worry me because we don't produce as much as we used to, and we do consume more. And I see, this isn't necessarily just the government thing. I see people that get caught up in this rat race. I see people that used to make 3 times as much money as I used to make living in tents that had all this stuff because they just didn't use their heads. And a part of me thinks that's kind of like the canary in the mine, that's those people, their actions and the consequences they have, that's going to lead to what happens to our government and our country.
Right. I mean, I think that's exactly right. And the savings rate, it actually has gone up with the recession, and that's a good thing. I mean, that's what we need. The problem is, at this point, the government keeps running up more debt. So they're offsetting what people are trying to do. People are trying to fix their own problems. They're trying to pay down their debt and improve on their situation. They know they need to save more money, but the government, they're going to run a $2 trillion deficit this year or something close to it. I mean, so anything that the average American is saving, it's just being wrecked by the federal government. And with the recession, a lot of local and state governments, they're cutting back, or at least
they should be cutting back.
They should be cutting back. But at least with them, if they want to continue the spending, they need to tax the people, which isn't a good thing, but at least people know what they're dealing with. At least they can fight those taxes. With the federal government, because of the Federal Reserve, they can just keep spending and spending. They can deficit spend all day long. Whereas state and local governments that can't print money, they can't get away with that. So it's really the federal government that's the biggest disaster right now, because the state and local governments, at least what's going on. Either, okay, taxes need to go up, or spending needs to be cut or held in check. So at least we understand what's going on there.
I think right now, if someone were to watch our show, they'd probably say, what are these guys talking about? Prices are stable or going low. Why are they worried about all this spending and inflation, And it's almost like the grasshopper and the ants fable I learned as a kid. It's like, and I think they're grasshoppers looking at us as ants being stupid, but ultimately we have spent the money, and sooner or later, possibly sooner, there is going to be inflation. Interest rates are going to have to go higher. And do you have any predictions for when that'll happen, how much, what will happen? Because I kind of do myself.
Well, the timing is very hard. You never know with the timing. It's very hard, and you never know what could happen. I mean, maybe for some reason all of a sudden, Ben Bernanke and Barack Obama become libertarians or something and change their policy. But given what's out there right now, I mean, the Federal Reserve, if you look at the adjusted monetary base, they've essentially doubled the money supply in the last year. So they've created as much money in the last year as they did the previous 90 years. And I mean, it's definitely a scary thing. Now, right now, that money has gone to the banks, and the banks are actually keeping it on reserve because they're scared of the economic conditions. So a lot of that money hasn't filtered into the system yet. And on top of that, people, because they're saving more, it's actually had a good effect on prices. Now, people see there may have been a small drop in some prices. Obviously, housing's gone down quite a bit. Over time, it's actually a good thing if prices go down. People are so fearful of it, they think that's the cause of the recession, but it's not. That's the one good thing. I mean, it's just like during the Great Depression, the one good thing they had is that prices were cheaper. I mean, you could actually afford more with your dollars. But with what they're doing right now, eventually this new money is going to hit the system. It's going to be won out by banks, and it's going to cause a dramatic rise in prices. And it's going to be hard for them to pull that back because of the high debt that the federal government has. I mean, they're making all these promises, and of course we've got Medicare and Social Security coming too. Those problems.